Hello and welcome to the 741 channel. Thank you for stopping by. Today we're going to take a look at fixing this Whirlpool Cabrio dryer. The problem with the dryer today is that when it runs, it squeaks really loudly. Other than that, it seems to still work okay. So anyway, let's pull this thing apart and see what's going on. So the first thing we're going to do is remove these two screws that are underneath the lint trap door. Now on my machine there's only one screw because I've already been in here doing some troubleshooting, and when I took it apart I lost one of my screws down here in the lint trap. So you want to keep an eye on those and don't drop them in there if you can help it. So the next thing I'm going to do is pull this thing away from the wall a little bit so that I can flip the top open. So the next thing I'm going to do is pop the top open on the machine here. And in order to do that, we just have to release two spring clips that are in the front of the machine. There's one here behind this seam and one here behind that seam, and then the whole top will pivot up and out of the way. So I'm going to use this tool. This is actually a trim tool for a car, but it should work in this application. If you don't have something like this, you can use a flat blade screwdriver or maybe something like a stiff putty knife. So really all you have to do is get this thing in the seam here and push in on the spring clip that's right there to release it. So as you can see, the top just hinges up. So the next step is going to be to remove the door assembly from the unit. Now before we do that and remove any of the screws that hold it on, we're going to need to disconnect this connector here that enables the safety switch for the door. Okay, so now there's two screws that we're going to need to remove, one on either side of the door assembly. Now they're a little hard to see in this camera angle, but they are the topmost screws that are on this inner seam here, and the head faces the inside of the unit. So I'm just going to use a 5/16 socket here to remove those. Now that the two screws and the wire is disconnected, we should be able to just pull the whole door assembly kind of straight up and out, and it should release from the unit. There's just a couple of clips on the bottom that hold it in. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways we can attack this at this point. Probably the more common way, and maybe the better way to do it, would be to remove the whole drum assembly and replace the belt while we're at it, since that involves removing the belt from the unit. Now, I'm not going to do that, partly because my belt is in great shape. The belt looks still brand new, really, on this machine, even though it's 9 years old at this point. And the other reason I'm not going to do it is because I'm in confined quarters here, and in order to get the drum off would be a little bit difficult, kind of maneuvering things around, or I'd have to pull the dryer out of here completely and work in a different area. So what I am going to do is try and just reach in under here, which is where the tensioner is, and replace it without removing all the stuff around it. We're under the right front corner of the machine now and freehand with the camera, so I apologize if this gets a little bit shaky. But what we're looking at here is the motor assembly, and in particular this piece here. This is the tensioner. You can kind of see a spring there, and if I lift up on that, you may be able to see the tension releases on the main drive belt for the drum. So the part that's actually failing in this machine is the idler pulley, and in particular the bearings that are in the pulley, and that's what's causing all the noise. So we're going to need to replace this whole assembly in order to get that pulley replaced. What I'm going to do next is lift up on the tensioner to remove the tension, and then I'm going to slip the belt off of the pulley here. Now this is easier to do when I don't have a camera in the way, but I think you kind of get the idea. So now with the belt off of the tensioner, what I'm going to do now is use a pair of needle nose pliers and get the spring off of the tensioner. But the camera's kind of in my way, so I'm going to have to move you guys over to the side. So as you may be able to see, I've got the spring disconnected from the motor mount here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this 3/8 inch socket and just remove this bolt here that holds the tensioner onto the motor bracket. So here's a look at the old versus new idler arms that I bought, and you can see they're pretty much the same thing, except for the fact that the pulley on this one is seized, or almost seized, and this one spins freely. So I ended up ordering the new tensioner directly from Amazon. There's the part number there, and if you're interested in visiting the Amazon product page, you'll find a link down in the description below. So I'm going to bring the new tensioner in and position it so the pivot hole lines up with this hole here, and then I'll bring the pivot screw back in and put that in and then tighten it up. Okay, so I'm going to bring the spring back in, and I'm going to take the end with the larger hook. I'm going to loop it around this bracket on the end of the idler arm so that it's through this hole. And we want to make sure that the other end, the smaller hook end of the spring, the open end faces in towards the motor. So next up, I'm going to use my needle nose pliers and hook that other end of the spring over that small notch in the motor bracket. Okay, so next up I'm going to try and reroute the belt here. Now this is a little easier said than done with the camera in the way, but I'll do my best. So we're going to loop this around the motor pulley, and then it's going to come back around the idler pulley. So then what I'm going to do is lift up the idler, get the belt around the pulley, and that should do it. Okay, so next up I'm going to bring back the door assembly and put this on. You can see that there's two hooks down here that go into two slots on the back of the door assembly. We're just going to put this in, slide them over the slots, and kind of let it drop on. Now that that's all set, I'm going to bring back these two sheet metal screws that go behind the door and hold the top of it in place. Next up, we'll reconnect the connectors for the door switch wires. Next up, I'll bring the lid back down and reattach it to these clips here. And then last up, I'll put the screws in underneath the lint trap lid. Okay, so now it's the moment of truth. Let's fire it up and see if it squeaks. So that's pretty much going to wrap up the repairs on this Whirlpool Cabrio dryer. If you want to see more about that idler pulley that I purchased from Amazon, you'll find a link to the Amazon product page down in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to leave a comment or subscribe, feel free to do that as well. Thanks for watching.